reported, but if there are differences in the valuation, well, when the revaluations are done, are they reported back to the Audit and Risk Committee?
When the revaluations are done, the first time that they'll be reported would be as a result in the draft annual report that we bring back to the City Delivery Committee. So that would be the first opportunity for elected members to see the impact of that in the financial year that we're reporting on. You won't see the impact of depreciation in that annual report, just the uplift in asset value, but we do, as in the revaluation report, we do have an indication of what next year's depreciation will look like, and at that point we can highlight to you what the uplift in depreciation is likely to be for the following year.
And I guess a question for the chair, or as well as the chair. So I just wonder if the delivery committee is the right place to be the first, if we've got significant variances on the revaluations, should that come to the Audit Risk Committee? Because that, I would have thought that would have been a more sensible place than the delivery committee.
Is the rationale because the Audit and Risk Committee meets less frequently? Is that the...
I was just thinking of that cycle of committee meetings, and I know that when we're working on our annual report, we bring a couple of drafts to the City Delivery Committee. Yeah. So that was the first time that we would have the opportunity to report that, but we can definitely bring it to the Audit and Risk Committee as well. We would do that unless we created a separate report that would come in the potentially, depending on the timing, the interim or final audit reports that we bring to this committee.
I would have thought that's quite a good, sensible plan, isn't it?
Yeah, through the chair, if I could just add, I think that's absolutely right. I think City Delivery is because of the reporting part of their terms of reference. This committee should certainly have overview in terms of the risk that it creates in terms of what it's doing for future rating levels, for example.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I just look at page 32 on Stella. We're talking about various different things that we're revaluing. We have the library collection in there. I was just wondering whether we do include the museum collection at Tauranga, whether that's actually part of our scope on this.
We don't tend to value, or we haven't in the past, the museum collection. We value the library collection internally, use the staff to do that valuation. It's not really material enough to carry out a valuation on the museum or the library stuff, but we do the library stuff as just so we know what it's sort of got, what its value is, but it's not a financial valuation per se.
Sorry, Colin. So if the building at Newton Street burned down and all our treasures were lost, are we insured, or?
We are insured. Yes, we are insured for a value, but we haven't had a separate valuation on the museum collection at all in the past.
Okay. This seems like a bit of a gap there. How do we know if we haven't valued it what it's worth?
Leon, could you inform us further on the valuation of the museum collection?
No, unfortunately not. All I'm thinking of is if it's insured, the company will look at the valuation of the arts pieces. If it's not material to the annual report, I agree with what's just been said. It wouldn't be valued because it'll just be an extra cost.
I have a question from Rohario Murray.
Morena tātou. Ko te mea tuatahi me mihi kātika ki a koe Councillor Morris me tō karakia I whakawāte ai tō tātou nei hui. O tira kia tātou katoa. I just first wanted to acknowledge Councillor Morris opening up our hui today with a karakia. And also my apologies for not being there in person today. I do have a cough, so if I start going into a coughing fit while I'm talking, I'll just mute myself and you can just guess what the rest of my question would be. But turning now to the team, thank you so much for preparing your report. I really enjoyed having a read through it, and Leon, it's really good to see you at the table again. Now my question is, I had a look at the audit plan and I was really looking at some of the areas that looked at significant risk or inherent risk. And one area that I focused on was on page 3 of the audit plan, which is page 30 of our agenda, and that is around risk of management override of internal controls. Now, I've just got a couple of questions in this regard, mainly around just trying to get my understanding around it. So the first one is around, given the scale of what the council's managing right now, like the civic building and infrastructure projects, I just wanted to understand, are there any areas where we think the risk of override might be higher, like places where senior leaders might have more discretion or influence over how things are reported or valued? And so that's the first question. The second question is around the use of, I think it's external auditors, or there's a group of auditors issuing instructions. And I just want to understand, how confident are we that those auditors are applying the same level of scrutiny there? Yeah, if you're able to help my understanding, that would be great. Thank you.
Kia ora, Rio. Thank you very much for the questions. Very good questions. I very seldom get questions on risk of management override, but I have had in the past. It's interesting that people skip over it, and it's actually so important. So first of all, yes, there are areas that are more of a concern for us at any entity. So just first of all, the auditing standards expect me to treat this as a significant risk at every single audit, every single entity. So I'm not focusing on it because I think there's an issue at Tauranga City Council. But the areas that we are really focusing on are definitely journals, because that's when interesting transactions can happen if there aren't scrutiny over that. Valuations, not only the fair value of property, plant and equipment, which is a significant balance on your balance sheet, but also investment property, any other financial assets that you may have. And then any provisions that may have crept into the financial statements. So provisions is probably more of an issue in private sector, because you use provisions to try and reduce your tax bill. But even in a public sector environment, we need to make sure that those where the valuations or the uncertainty is a bit higher, that's where we need to focus on. I think that answers your first question. I must remember the second question was, group instructions. Yes, I consider myself as a good auditor, and I also audit BVL, so those group instructions come from myself to myself. Sorry, that was a bit of just a smile on the face, but yeah, we use the group instructions, and there's actually a group auditing standard that's been much improved because of issues found across the world, all entities, where you must make sure that whatever group report up to the parent, which is you, is audited and audited to the same level. Now, BVL is the biggest one in your group. It's also a public entity, so it's also audited under the auditing standards of the Auditor General. And that gives me comfort that that audit will be completed at the same level.
Ka pai. Thank you so much, Leon. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Schooler, you had an additional question.
I did.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, basically when we moved into the building or got the keys, that's when the lease kicked in. So that's now been accounted for in this year. And so that transaction from that side is complete. And then Audit just need to check the accounting treatment of it.
Okay, great. So yes. And last one, sorry. We got an update on risk pool and
so the aftercare liability, we can bring that information back to you, yes.
okay, but so can we make sure that that's on the action schedule, please?
Certainly.
What's it called?
Oh, no, it's a risk liability.
Okay.
Any questions from Councillor Roseboom? No. Councillor Taylor?
Sorry, just following on from Deputy Mayor's question about risk pool, is there a definitive date when that ends and, I don't know, incidents stop happening and getting added to the list?
Through the chair, suggest we'll bring you back a more comprehensive overview of risk pool, what that liability is, and end dates to put it all together.
I've got the standard question, Leon. So have you, are you in a comfortable position in terms of answers to questions, access to information from the Tauranga City Council staff perspective? Everything's been provided to you and you've got no concerns there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are comfortable. We've completed the first part of our interim audit in March sometime, and we're starting today with the second part of the interim audit, and up to now I haven't had any complaints that, not that I expected any, but it's good to just check. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. Just another question from me around software as a service. Of course, with a lot of these changes to the software world, like, you know, Microsoft 365, you build annually as opposed to once every few years. In terms of capitalising software as a service, what's your understanding or view from Audit New Zealand's perspective?
Oh, now you're asking me a question a few years ago. I'll try and answer to the best of that I can. We looked at it in detail about 2-3 years ago and worked with management about what should be capitalized and not. At the moment, I'm not considering that a big risk to my audit, so I'm not focusing on it. So I'm not giving you much of an answer, I know, but yeah.
And is there anything, Leon, from your perspective that you want to elevate to the committee in terms of comment?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will contact you directly if there's any reason to be concerned.
Thank you, I appreciate it. If there are any further questions from our members? Yes, go for it, Councillor Scholar.
Sorry, part of the revaluation. So what, is there a revaluations policy? Is that how, what it sets out the rules?
Yeah, we have a policy for the different types of assets that we value, and that's included in the annual report and the policies under the fixed assets section.
But if we were looking for the policy that sets out how we do it, where would we find that?
Yeah, we don't have that specifically. We just we work to a we have a policy that we follow as a guideline for when we do our evaluations and what gets revalued, but we don't have a detailed policy of how we do that.
So through the chair, if I could just add, so it's an accounting policy that's included in the annual report document, so we can circulate that to you if that would be helpful.
Well,
so it's not a council approved policy; it's one as part of the annual report document.
Yes, please. And I'm just thinking that it's does have quite significant impact on the business. So it's surprising it's not a council approved policy, I guess. I don't know. I don't know enough. Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, sorry, Paul, I have to differ because the annual report is actually approved by the council.
Yes.
So that accounting policy is part of the annual report, so approved by council. And you don't need a separate, so it's in there stating the accounting standards actually require you on a regular enough basis to ensure that the fair value of your assets are within a tolerable range to the actual carrying value. Carrying value mean what you report in the annual report. Fair value is, what you value these assets to be. So that's why you do, usually every 3 years should be sufficient. We've seen in the past where you have to do it almost on an annual basis because of cost movements in some of the infrastructure assets. And then in the meantime, you do fair value assessment just to make sure that these things are still reasonable, which you are doing on most of your assets this year.
Okay, and so it would be good to get the policy and maybe even bring it back here so we're just comfortable with that before we go through an annual report. Thank you.
If I could just add to that as well, just because it might just help in terms of, so our long-term plans and annual plans will always increase the value of assets through the assumptions that are adopted as part of that. So, and that's tended in the past to be the local government cost index. So they do have a revaluation increment included within those budgets. Where we've run into issues in the past is where there has been a spike in those costs exceeding what those indices would look like, which is where we get these large, chunky increases. So it's not that we only, when we say we do them every 3 years, we actually are taking into account the value of assets on a more regular basis, but it's not a full revaluation. And as Leon points out, is we always have to do that fair value assessment, which, and my knowledge of accounting standards is a little bit dated, but on the materiality levels, is once you're over 10%, it triggers a revaluation that's required, even if it's out of cycle, effectively in there. So that happens as well. So. And so
where does it set out the rules of those calculations you include in the long-term plan? Again, so
that's part of the assumptions that are adopted by council when they set their long-term plan, which is.
I'm thinking a revaluations policy is going to be would be quite nice because it has a big impact. It's even the fact that who we get to do the valuations, all of that sort of stuff. I would have thought, can we have as an action that we want to relook at that? Well, we'll get the policy and then we'll have a discussion about it. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and welcome, Councillor Crowther. Just had a message from our colleagues online that they're struggling to hear us through the microphone, so if we could, I've moved mine a little bit closer to my mouth. Any further questions online, team? No, that being the case, let's move to the recommendation, which is on page 25 of our agenda, to receive the report. Do I have a mover to receive the report? Moved by...
Happy to move.
It didn't come through. It's been moved by Councillor Schooler. Is there a seconder out there? I'm looking at you, Rohario. Seconded by Rohario. Any discussion on that? There is none. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Now let's jump back, team, to 9.1. Thank you, Leon, and thank you, team. Thank you, appreciate it. Let's jump back now to the health and safety report, which begins on page 19. And we have Tracy Benjamin, the Health and Safety and Wellbeing Manager, and Jan Pedersen, Head of People. Welcome.
Joanna, I'm standing in for Barbara, just to her.
Thank you, Joanna. Is there any cover to the report that you wish to give to us before we dive into questions?
Thank you, Chair Morris. So no, we're just going to take the report as read, and we thought we'd open the floor to you.
Okay, questions, team.
Yes, please.
Please, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Schooler, then Rohario Murray.
So I've got a few, and this is really it's really good to have the information, thank you, and it's just, please bear with us while we make sure we're understanding it well. So on the OCP annual report, the percentages coming through are really good, and I did actually just look to see if I could get some comparisons of what other entities were doing, and I did find that on a Google search that Kāinga Ora last year actually had 20%, which they had as a number where we're at 4 or 5, but they did say that was a big jump for that was 2024, a big jump from 22-23 when it had been 7%. So just on one survey of one, I did feel that we were that was looking positive. A question on the number of hours, and also I just also appreciating that 55% of the issues raised are personal, and obviously plus some of the work and personal as well. So that was, I think it means we haven't got, there's nothing that raises a risk to me. I did wonder, hours worked by month, what the relevance is. Do we, does everyone do timesheets? Do we pay overtime? And can you just talk about why that's relevant, please?
Thank you. So through the chair. So that was a request to be included in the previous report, and so we've just carried that through this time as well. My understanding was that you wanted to see the relation of hours worked per month in relation to the events reported, but please let me know.
Yes, I can confirm that. Yeah, there was a request from myself just to provide some insight in terms of incidents and injuries relative to the hours worked. So, for example, in January, which is a big month in terms of annual leave, if there was a significant increase in injuries there, there's less people working during that time, and so that would give rise to a few questions as to what was happening. Yeah.
May I carry on? Sorry.
Go for it.
So on the events, how do we report near misses, please?
Thanks. So through the chair, so we use our health and safety system, which is called Dampstra in this business, and so some people, depending on what the near miss is, it's the potential for the harm. So it is an area that we're still trying to improve the understanding across the business. Some people just might report it under the incident category because something has happened though no one was harmed. Other people go, there was the potential for me to be harmed, so they use the near miss category. But they can report in, and my team assess those reports as they come through, and we'll either categorise it, work with the teams into the correct category, or we might deem it as a non-work related if it was outside of our work categories.
Thank you. And I did report a near miss when a TCC truck nearly backed out on me. Do these include elected members' reports or incidences?
Yes, I believe that would have to be under. I'd have to double check that one.
I know that I have been told it was followed through, but I just wondered in the reporting about that one.
Definitely is in there, but we would generally categorise it as other non-employee.
Oh, sorry, can we just bring the mic a little bit closer?
Yeah, so it's definitely in there. I remember seeing it. So, but in terms of categorisation, they would generally come under a non-employee incident. So, yeah.
Thank you. I've got a few more, but I'll have a break.
Rohari o Murray.
Morena koutou. Thank you very much for the report that you have produced for us. I did have some questions about the numbers, and the areas that I focused on was on that first page or page 20 of the agenda. So when we're looking at the top 3 divisions utilising counselling services, so you've got people, 15 under community services, 15 under infrastructure, and then 9 from corporate services. What's that out of the total of? Is that out of the total number of people accessing the services, or is that the number of people in that area working? Are you able to clarify for me, please?
Yes, Thank you. So through the chair, so that is the number of people within that division accessing the service. So that would be 15 people within community services and so forth.
And so my next question is, so that's 15 out of a number, so that's 29% of people working in the community services area that are accessing these services. Is that correct?
No, so that would be 29% out of the 1,200. So they're going out of the 1,200 people that this is assessed across. 15% came from community services, which made up 29%. I feel like I need to get the audit and finance people back. So it, yeah. Sorry, probably not explaining too well. So it's 29% of all the people that uptook it, but it's not reflective across the whole 1,200. It's just, say, if there were 4% of people that took it, of that 4%, 29% were in community services.
So what I'm just trying to understand is if it's 15 people in the community services division or area, then how many people work in that area? So is it 15 out of 15? Is it 15 out of 500? Having that level of information with that number will help us to have an understanding of whether that is very critical, that every staff member in community services are currently accessing these services right now. Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do. Thank you for rephrasing. So yes, we can certainly add that level of detail in moving forward. And I can speak to community services and infrastructure. They are our leading division, so they are approximately 300 perhaps per division.
Okay. Helpai, thank you. I'm going to ask a couple more questions about this area, and then the only other area I want to ask questions about is around physical assault and antisocial behaviour risk. So when I had a look at the numbers, especially around, I think, the quarterly referral rates, like when I look at this, I'm really looking at it from a audit and risk point of view. So what are the risks here? And the ones that come to mind for me are access risks. Are our staff, able to access OCP quite easily? Then I'm also looking at it from a litigation risk point of view. So what's driving? Where are the drivers? Is it performance-related issues? Are there other things going on? And I know that you've given us data which looks at both personal issues and work issues, and I'm only really concentrating on the work issues part of it. The last part is around leadership and cultural risk. Are our leaders, are our management leaders promoting these services enough? Because if they are, then that might also reduce the risk for the organisation. So the question is, the organisation is undergoing or has undergone a significant transformation or transition that I can see. You've just moved into a completely new building, there's a full council in place now, and these could be potentially areas of high stress event. Are we expecting that there could be a rise in counselling services during this time?
Cool. Thank you. So through the chair, so we do promote in various access and means. It's on our internal insider page, which is our TCC intranet. We had posters in the old building, still to be established in this new building here, but we will make sure they're visible across the board as well. With the recent transition we've been going through, we even brought a counsellor on site for a couple of days just to make sure it was really easily and accessible with all the change that we're going through, and that had some very positive feedback. And we are just looking into the ways that people are reaching out. So predominantly people like face-to-face off-site, and that seems to be working quite well, but there is teleconference and other methods is available as well to anyone who needs the service. And so to my knowledge, I haven't received any reports that the service has been inaccessible.
Thank you. And just one last question for this section. So the referrals, is that say, for example, an employee says to a manager, I'm really stressed out right now. And so the manager might refer and say, just letting you know, we've got OCP services available for you to, or counselling for you to attend if that's something you'd like to go to. Whether they take it up or not is up to them. But are we capturing that data of a manager referred 3 of their staff to counselling and that only one of them took it up? The reason why I'm asking it like this is really to understand our risk as an organisation. Are we doing all that we can to reduce the risk of, say, not doing our full due diligence here?
Thank you. So through the chair, so we don't capture if a manager has referred them on. If that employee then elects to phone them themselves, it would be captured as a self-referral. So I can't think at this point where we might capture that data. We do have, I believe it is in the very high 90s of self-referrals. So most people are contacting the Employee Assistance Program directly themselves. What we do offer is significant events. If there's been a grief that is maybe within the council, we sometimes get someone on site for a whole team. So that is if we note that there could be a particular impact to a wider group, we'll try to make sure a council is brought to them, so at least they've got the opportunity to talk through any items that might be distressing them. And it's always offered in any other situations. Managers are regularly referring, but again, it's just they might then call themselves to take that up.
Okay, thank you. And just on that point where managers are referring, it'll be good to know that how are we capturing that data, you know, that we know that managers are referring. And this isn't me trying to have a go at managers, it's really around, can we show that our managers are referring here, just to ensure that we are trying to keep our staff safe as well as limiting the risk that we carry as an organisation. I'll move on to the next point. Sorry, this is just a couple of questions here, and it's on page, it looks like page 24 of the agenda, around assault and violence at work. And my questions here is, it says here that here are some steps that the council has taken to address these issues effectively. And I note the number is, 42% of the reported events in the third quarter constituted assault or verbal, physical, assault here, which was a common risk. There's a list of different ways of addressing those issues, so zero tolerance policy, training and education, safe reporting, etc. How is the council monitoring whether these interventions are reducing the incident rates over time?
Thank you. So we do work, because this is more our public-facing roles, we just have to kind of look at this in different formats. So we might have a targeted approach in certain areas, so we might use safety through design. So I know we have, with some of our libraries, removed walls to increase visibility, and then you monitor thereafter the fact to see has there been a decrease in the reported incidents that led to the change that was required. We've also had items like security guards, which you can just talk to the staff and go, how does it feel, having security guards on site? And then we use these other mechanisms, and it is a follow-up with the staff involved. And the effectiveness is assessed through risk register reviews, and so talking to those staff, getting them involved, and just seeing what else we can offer in that space. It's an area we're constantly looking at. But I might also introduce Joanna Thomas, so she works in our libraries and can probably speak to this as well.
Yeah, kia ora rau. It is a good question, reducing the incidences or near misses over time. But I guess that's our goal, is that near misses will still be reported, and because we're dealing with a lot of external factors with public people coming into a space, there's a lot of factors that we actually don't have control over. So we can say we have actually had a reduction in the figures last quarter to this quarter. So we can say, well, yes, some of our controls are working well, but that's no guarantee that things will, things won't result in, external factors. Obviously it's quite a community-related impact, how people behave in public spaces.
So do you feel that those, that the measures that are in place right now, is there anything missing there that will ensure that staff feel safe when they're working in those front-facing jobs where there's the risk is so high of assault happening?
It's a great question, also a really hard one to answer. What we do look at is any time an incident, near miss or anything does happen, is we really delve down into those controls, see what worked, what may have not been applicable at the time, or what needs improvement. Over the most recent events, there haven't been anything further added. It was all the controls were deemed that they were right for the location, but as Joanna called out, some of these external factors, we can't control. The people might be verbally intimidating, but we can provide that OCC, the employee assistance support. We can work with them on de-escalation training and have those security guards. There's that level of support for them. We also have, the managers are there to talk through them and debrief and just constantly share the learnings around, and yes, always looking to improve, but the controls seem quite adequate for the time being.
And I'd just like to comment on one of the controls there is collaboration with enforcement agencies, and that's something that we've worked really hard on. We have our advisors, Paul Mason and Helen Whareatu, on the streets and working really closely with the police, and that's been a significant factor. So, that's something, the staff resource that goes into that, and the work with our security agency, New Tech, and TTOC, which monitors the cameras. So with all our equipment and all our staff training, there's a constant monitoring of our sites by the TTOC so that they can report to the police what is happening. We could say, well, the thing that would be missing would be the police could be walking through the library, 5 times a day, but we can't make that happen. Certainly the work that Paul, Mason and Helen have done as safety advisors has been quite significant in the last few years, So that's been part of that risk assessment and controls.
Thank you. Thank you so much for providing your answers. And as a former short loans librarian for 2 years while I was studying up at Auckland University, and my mum was a librarian for years, I really appreciate all the mahi that you do and, making it a warm and inviting space for our community. So tēnā koutou, kia ora.
Thank you.
Question from Councillor Taylor.
Thank you for the report. Really good. I know that for a fact that there's been some instances in the last 3 or 4 months that have been reported to the police regarding threats to staff and that sort of stuff. When those are resolved, or if they're not resolved, do we get a report back here specifically? I know some of them obviously wouldn't be brought into public, but Audit and Risk, I would have thought, should know the outcome of some of the things that have happened, and personally from where I sit, we get threats every day, just for some of them aren't serious and we don't take them seriously, but it would be good to know that when a staff member is threatened that it's taken right through as far as we can take it. So a number of questions in there, but I think you get the gist of what I'm talking.
Absolutely.
So yes, we can look, it would need to be a public excluded, obviously, type of agenda item, but we can look to provide further details in that space if you're interested. Whenever the police are involved, we'll obviously follow through and support the member depending on the degree that's required at the time. So if it's a verbal threat to a staff member, we can provide support right through to trespass arrangements and restraining orders and things like that. And obviously if it's a police complaint against any of our staff, then we'd follow through with police collaboration on any parts that were required as well. But we can start to pull a report together on that if required.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Taylor. I concur. It'd be good to have a table in the confidential section around that with a bit of narrative. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, Chair. So just, I think, going on from Rohario's really relevant questions on assault and ensuring safety for staff, how is social media assaults reported, please? Or defined?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. Obviously, there are a number of policies in place that council would lean on. And, you know, in some cases, like some of the more physical environments, we would look to use police if need be. Yeah, it is something that is very, very worrying and has a huge effect on well-being of our staff. You know, we've had some events that have played out in the last 6 months. So yeah, it's absolutely something we do monitor. In terms of reporting, absolutely, they get included into our events. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And another couple, just on the bottom of, we've got a table saying understand at the bottom of 23. Can you just explain what I read it and I thought great, but I'm not sure what I was taking from that, please.
No problem. Thank you. So that I'm just doing a section in each report just under the due diligence responsibilities, and so that just touches on each point. So there's your to know your risks, understand the resource requirements, monitor, comply and validate, and they're all references to the due diligence requirements under the Health and Safety Act. So this is just a section that I've put in that covers how we recommend as part of TCC and elected members that you could meet your due diligence requirements.
So next time we'll get a different one, the next one along. Beautiful, thank you. Just on page 22, under the pulse, I think it's really great that we're getting so many people doing the pulse, participating. I'm not sure how often we need to do it, but that's a different topic. But I do understand that each team actually talks about the results that the team has done. So it does suggest that it's better to actually say you like your manager than not, because if the team environment is there and you say you report not, it's not a great way of it might be a career limiting move.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, it is anonymous.
But not within a team.
It is still anonymous.
Yeah, but if you've got a team of, what's the smallest team?
I think the smallest sample size is 4.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So if you've got 4 and 2 get on really well and there's a boss and then there's somebody that's saying they don't think their manager's much good, it's not that anonymous. So I would, as a career limiting move, I'd probably say I think my leader's great.
Look, sometimes it's a good opportunity to talk to your leader, maybe before the debrief. So, yeah, it actually it encourages collaboration within a team to address issues, and because we have these regularly, I think people are fairly comfortable at actually being upfront and providing feedback. So, yeah, we see it working really well.
I would like you to think about whether you can actually report up. Because if you've got a leader who is not happy, we want to change, right? We want to make things happen differently throughout the levels of council. We want of TCC staff. We want people to be able to say, I know I'm was told this is how I do this job, but actually I think of better ways of doing it. If the leader doesn't want to change, how do they report that they're wanting to make change but there's some objection or it's not stopped? And then is that career limiting to be able to actually say, well, I'm hearing elected members say they want change, they want process change. How do you get that if you sort of just have to be collaborative within your team?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Look, we encourage, freedom of speech within council, that people can talk to their manager's manager where they do see issues, and we will always look to support the teams to, work through those issues.
If I can just add, the report asks, separate to the data you have here, how do you see the culture of your team? Do you see it as innovative and creative? Do you see it as people-centric or even something like toxic? Now, that doesn't necessarily identify the manager, but it does give us indications whether the shift towards improvement and activity is a gap, or whether the culture is more collegiate. What type of culture of an organisation do we have? That's something we could bring back to the group, which gives you an indication of whether people are thinking about improvement in the way that you've raised there. The other point is that this data is primarily intended to understand whether the health of the team, whether the culture of the team, whether we have a risk. Identifying opportunities for improvement and looking at activities to change the way we do things, it doesn't normally come through this channel. This is primarily a health and safe, an engagement message as opposed to a productivity or opportunity for change. That might be a different type of data set that we'd need to bring back.
So thank you, Alistair. Two things on that. One, I don't know if it's safe if you've got 4 in the team and you say it's anonymous. It's not a safe environment to criticise, number one. Number two, I do know that our pulse comes out as people-centric, and that's lovely, and it's great that we enjoy our jobs, but we're going to, as elected members, we're going to be pushing a little bit harder, and we do want to be innovative. We do want to make changes. I would like a question in there, something like, have you suggested a change in the way you do your job in the last 3 to 6 months? And a second question, was that taken up? Were you supported in making that change? These are things that I think we do hear that, with a lot of people and a lot of process, we understand processes followed sometimes more strongly than innovation is adopted. So I think we need to be careful that if we're saying it's for safety reasons, making sure we're safe, I'm not sure it is if it's a team of 4 is said to be anonymous, but also I'd like to take you up on your suggestion that a different data set might help us drive a little bit more innovation and change and questioning process, and that being accepted by managers and the executive going forward.
So we can get that data. Just on the anonymity question, I wonder, from a benchmark perspective, the number, whether it's, if I'm in a team of 4 or 7, what, from an industry perspective, where the line is before people can be identified, because one would assume that there's external indicators as to when a team is so small, you just can't. But you can join 2 teams together. You shouldn't drop them out, but we should just join them together, yeah. And then you've got 2 leaders that you might be talking about, which actually means that it's less easy to be saying who it is.
But we absolutely provide a lot of support for where we see issues within teams, and looking to resolve or elevate leadership where possible. So that's something we do spend a lot of time working with the teams on where we're not happy with the results.
Just to add, I think the beauty of this is actually it is in the discussions that it creates, is where we get the gold coming out of it. And all I would add is this is one piece of information, and to take your point is that at executive, we do encourage people to talk up when they've got ideas and when they do things. And I've driven people crazy for years talking about outcome over process and not following process and coming up with a bad outcome, but focus on the outcome. So it is something that we will continue to actually just push that for innovation in that space.
And I guess I do slightly question leadership. The question is, do you vibe with your leader? We're a council delivering services to our people, and I'm just wonder how professional that is for an organisation that is trying to increase level of delivery. So that's just a question on that one. And then just on unplanned turnover, it's quite, so we've gone from about 12% of unplanned turnover down to 9%, judging by what I'm trying to read. I would much prefer there to actually have, this is a number of roles we've got, this is the staff who left, these are the new positions created, these are the current vacancies, just so we do know. And then on your people who've left, you can say, if you want to break that down by redundancies or they chose to leave or retired, that would be useful. But that chart, it's quite hard to, I don't quite know what I'm meant to be reading into that one. But it's information I want, but I just think we can add a little bit more detail, please.
Thank you for that. Yes, we have provided further detail within your Stella, which is in the, obviously in the confidential section. So that you are getting more information there on, where we're at with our staff numbers, our redundancies, where we're tracking with vacancies. So that is in Stella for you.
But even on here, if we had numbers, just like the actual number rather than the percent would be useful on this chart.
Okay, happy to add that in.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a series of questions from myself following on from Councillor Schooler around the Pulse. It'd be really useful to see the date that the survey was open so that we can compare with current events or previous events. When was the last Pulse done?
Just trying to remember the actual date. February? No.
It's a really good question, but not off the top of my head. I believe it was it February?
February, March. Yeah.
Okay, so within the flux of organisational change, that's
or just
some pretty impressive results.
Just before change, really. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one will be interesting in that regard. In terms of
but just on that timing, elected members were settling in by then, so that's that big change had certainly impacted. So it's quite good that hasn't brought out more.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Yeah. In terms of the size of teams giving feedback, so if there's a team of less than 5, it'd be interesting to see what the cut-off is. Are the verbatims shielded from the manager if they only have a small team?
No, they receive
the verbatims.
Comments.
Okay.
And we certainly encourage people to be, if they're not comfortable talking in a team environment for their debriefs, that they meet with managers are meeting with staff on a one-on-one basis anyway, so we're hoping that feedback is provided there.
To Councillor Schooler's point, I think we need to give some consideration to that, the reporting up maybe to the next level of management, because it is hard in a small team to give feedback, and feedback is a gift, but to give that really honest, constructive feedback when you have a small team. As I've always said to my manager, as long as I'm part of your team, I'm always scoring a 10, because that's good for my career, and it also means that if I get the sack one day that your NPS will go down. So it's a little bit of self-protection there. And moving on back to the reference to the Health and Safety Committee at Council. How is that structured? So is there a higher number of non-management positions on the Health and Safety Committee? Because it's a representative body. How do you call for nominations? Is the management to staff ratio quite high in terms of the staff ratio relative to the management? And given that we've just been talking about libraries and community facilities and the incidents there, is there representation on the Health and Safety Committee from that activity? And does that activity have its own Health and Safety Committee?
Yes, so I can help answer with that one. So across the council, we deem our health and safety committees, we call them working groups, and we have split them into separate divisions, and we're reactive to the needs of, obviously it needs to represent the workers. So the library does have its own working group because they wanted to collate the information and talk collectively across their wider branches. So we have six working groups across council, and that's representing the different divisions. So we have like just for regulatory and compliance, and then we'll have libraries, and then we're grouping them together, maybe based on activity or focus predominantly. Each of those working groups will have a representative from the health and safety team, so my team, to go in and assist the proceedings, and we get a sponsor from management. So it's the workers that make up the groups. They'll have someone from the health and safety team to guide, and then a sponsor, which we aim for either a GM or a tier 3 directly below a GM to attend those groups as well. So that helps with your question earlier, direct feed up as well.
And sorry, just in terms of clarifying my understanding again, so the committees or the work groups there, less management membership and more staff membership, like heavily weighted to the staff?
Heavily weighted to staff membership.
Cool, that's great. And how is that, so is that reported to the minutes of their meetings reported to the bigger Health and Safety Committee and then to the executive like that? How would an action filter from one of the smaller work groups up to governance level?
So depending on the action that they're trying to achieve, it can either come through my team and we can guide. So just an example that comes to head is we had some stickers put in all the pool cars, so should anyone be in an accident, they wanted the registration easily visible. Because it was easy to achieve, we just helped action it in amongst that working group. We've had larger ones where we've had a speaker come to speak on sleep, and that went through the GMs for approval, and then between myself and the GM of that working group, we discussed the finance and who's to cover it and made sure that could be done as well, because it was a great idea from the working group. So it does depend on the actions they're wanting.
And given that we're elected representatives and all our contact details are public, there's an avenue for people to, and I've received feedback from staff anonymously from time to time through that channel, but how would an action or a recommendation from a committee reach the governance table?
Good question. Probably, it depends on what they're coming forward at. I think at this stage, off the top of my head, there hasn't been an action that's massively changed or merited to come to this forum, but we can certainly re-look at that and devise a way that maybe it needs to come forward.
If I could just add, on Friday when we went through the capital project list, there was a health and safety contingency fund that's available to be used. Right. So that's approved effectively and is available, and then we have used that over several years to actually do health and safety initiatives.
I just wonder, as those 2 points you made are terrific, right? And if we had just a table in here that was just the bullet points of if there are the actions from the Health and Safety Committee's actioned, because I think those are showing that we're doing the right thing, that we are, and it's the sort of thing that staff think, cool, okay, that's, it does happen, rather than it's just a theory of things happening, because they're great suggestions that are made and actioned, and it makes things better, right, which is what we want.
Yes, we can add that.
And I talk all that, I concur with that, Councillor Schooler. It's not governance wanting to get into the detail and manage a job for you, it's just so that our team know that their voice is heard, it is valued, and we are just having an FYI or oversight, and it's really important. Any other questions, perhaps online from the team? Councillor Crowther, Councillor Roseboom. Thank you, Rohario, for your contribution earlier. No, I don't detect any. Hey, thank you very much for the update. Much appreciated. And apologies for some further work coming in terms of the next report. Can I please have a mover to receive the report, which is on page 19 of the agenda, moved by Rohario Murray, seconded by myself. I'm going to put that. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to 9.3. I'm excited about this one because I know Councillor Schooler has been very passionate about this, not just in this committee but across council, and it's a very good thing. 9.3, status update on actions from prior audit and risk committee meeting. We are on page 55. And Alistair McNeil. Alistair's not here. That's all right. He's just gone. Oh, isn't that typical? You must have heard my voice outside.
Apologies.
Alistair, would you like to give us a brief overview of your paper and then take any questions?
Previous actions coming back. Yes, apologies. I'd actually just take it as read. This is an administrative catch-up on activities that we just needed to record. Have I got the right paper, Carolyn? Yeah. If there's any questions.
Any questions of the paper team? And again, thank you for it. It's great to see. Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, and thank you very. Oh yeah, yes, please. It's much easier than trying to. There's a few logistics here that are not as well thought out as they might be. No, so thank you very much for the paper, and on the. On the second one, the Audit and Risk Committee proposed forward work plan. The action required, so that was obviously the report name, and the action was a deep dive into how to manage legal risk as added to the work plan, and a PX, what does PX mean?
Public excluded, but that's a great point. We don't like
PX
acronyms.
does not sound public excluded to me, was held, but it's ongoing, so I think it's just we need to have an action of how we're doing that from a going forward. So a publicly excluded workshop was held. I would like to see that this committee gets a report every quarter, and in fact if there are critical risks, which I've got a note about later on the risk section, and it says the critical risks come back every 3 months. If they're critical, then we're quite happy to have papers in between meetings. So just on I'm not sure we should say closed. I think we should say it will become an action for every one of these.
Every committee.
Yeah, every committee.
Every committee. I just wanted to check, Paul, the legal update, that's not going to full council, would come here?
Yes, it is going to full council, so that was
Right.
agreed because of the implications are broad across all of council, that will go.
And how often is that going?
I'll need to check how often, but the next one will go at the June meeting.
So I think, well, maybe the action records that that records that.
And it may be that there's a complementary report for completeness that comes here as well. So there may be a more detailed for full council, but for audit and risk, having that time just to reflect, there may be an opportunity, Paul, for us to consider, without duplication, something for this committee.
Yes.
Things can get away from us over a period of months there, so it's good to have regular reporting.
The other question was just, is there any difference between in progress and pending?
No. I'm taking a punt on that, by the way, but I'm thinking no.
No, so those are my questions on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions online? No. No further questions. Thank you, Alistair. Let's move to page 55. We've got recommendations A, B and C. May I have a mover for recommendations A, B and C on page 55? I'll move it. Do I have a seconder?
We're just holding fire a minute, please. So just a question on the publicly excluded workshop. Was that just for this committee, as a clarification?
The workshop at the end of the meeting?
No, the workshop that we talk about on the 29th of April.
I'm just checking with my colleague Paul. Did we have a publicly excluded legal workshop, did we?
I don't have a note in my
I believe
placeholder.
Yeah, I believe that didn't take place, that meeting, and was put off at the time. But I would need to confirm.
Well, it's not in our diaries. Yeah. So can we?
Yeah.
So we need to amend the recommendation, and we can receive the report. But I'd like to. Sorry, can I suggest a recommendation that we receive the report, noting that the publicly excluded workshop has not yet taken place, and so the action is not closed.
Happy to move as such, and seconded by Councillor Schooler. Do you wish to speak to it?
No.
Any other speakers? That being the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Thank you very much, team. 9.4 now, which is the quarterly, what's the LGOIMA and privacy requests? Yes, quarter 3. And for those following at home, that is on page 58 of our agenda. Hi, Kath. Would you like to speak to it, or
Kia ora. I don't think I need to speak to it. If anyone has questions, then fire ahead.
Questions of Kath for this paper? Any questions online? While you're searching, Councillor, I will make the observation that the number of LGOIMA requests did decrease. A colleague of mine suggested that was because I've stopped putting in LGOIMA, so it was very kind of him to mention that, but thank you very much. And I'm happy to wait for the question. That's no issue.
Sorry, no, I don't have one.
Okay, there being no questions, can I please have, and thank you, Kath, for your time this morning. Happy to move receipt of the report on page 58. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Orohari or Murray. Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Thank you, team. We're being very efficient. Let's move to 9.5 on the agenda, which is on page 63, which is our risk management policy. Oh, welcome, Sharon. Good to see you. Good to see you. Sharon Herbst and Chris Quest. Would you like to speak to the report and then go to questions?
Happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
Any questions, team? I've got a question while you're following it. Thank you very much for the drafting of the report and the policy. I'm just wondering whether, and it's a question to my colleagues and the staff, whether you would be favourable to the idea of expanding the definition of risk to include likelihood times consequence, which is not in the definition of risk. The definition there reads on page, I keep rolling over it, page 69, the top of page 69, the effect of uncertainty on achieving objectives, whether negative, positive or both. And I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and the likelihood times consequence equation just kind of lives with me. I know I've mentioned it before, having trouble moving on from it, but is that something that the committee would be comfortable with? Councillor School as well, good with that. Rohari or Murray? That's a thumbs up from Rohari. Do you have a question as well?
Yes, I do. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, team, for the report here. I just have one question, and that's focused on, I think it would be paragraph 24 of your report, page 66, where under the heading Te Ao Māori approach. And so I'm really pleased to see the reference of manaakitanga in your policy, well, in the policy. Can you expand on what principles of manaakitanga are being drawn on here, and where in the policy or framework are those principles embedded in a practical way, and how do they shape our risk approach? Can I just check if somebody's talking? Because if you are, I can't.
Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry. No, we're good. We're good. We're just contemplating. Yeah.
Sorry, I would say that the whole purpose of the policy is around manaakitanga, protecting our people, so wanting to recognise our risks and then what we're doing about it. So it's not specifically mentioned, but it is what the whole policy is about.
And so can you just explain to me what your understanding of manaakitanga is?
Kia ora, Rohario. There's a number of policies that are cross-referenced here that do introduce some of my understanding of manaakitanga and how it relates to this policy. The first is reciprocity and generosity. Where we have a number of opportunities to engage with third parties, but also host different facilities, kindness and hospitality is really important to council, but we are mindful about, while we create an environment where individuals feel valued, we also have controls around that as well. So that policy is cross-referenced here. Inclusive participation is another aspect. It's not referenced in this document, but the creation of diverse perspectives is something that council has worked on, especially in the last 2 years, around a DEI policy and the active participation of different individuals. So those two aspects, I do think there's a gap here of being very clear within this document about how it shows up. I think cultural sensitivity for me, Rohario, is missing here, and that's another part of manaakitanga that we could include. But to Sharon's point about respecting and upholding mana, which for manaakitanga is obviously within the definition, it may not be called out directly, but it is implied in this one.
Okay, ka pai. Thanks, Alistair. The reason why I raised this is just sometimes we might draw on principles of manaakitanga. It's nice to have there, and there may be some values or principles of the organisation, but unless we really know what it means, what we mean by it, then if a staff member or somebody external challenges the council on their understanding of it, we need to be able to clearly articulate what that means for Tauranga City Council. So that's really the reasoning behind my question. I know of a case that happened a few years ago around where there were values of the organisation on the wall, and including kotahitanga, manaakitanga, and that was legally challenged when a staff member relied on those principles and values in terms of the suit that they were progressing at the time. So it's not me trying to test you guys to adequacy, your adequacy of knowledge around Māori principles, but more of a reminder that when we are using these principles, that we know where it comes from, we know the whakapapa of it, and we know what it means in terms of this organisation. Kia ora.
Thank you, Rohario. Another question from Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the policy, I see it was started in 2014, and was that the first revision in 2022?
Yeah, 2022 was the first revision
Okay.
since 2014.
I've got questions on both definition and scope. So definitions, I think, as I've said earlier, we do need to be, I don't think we can lump TCC staff, elected members, management and staff, and activities undertaken by staff under one term called council, because that's quite a lot. Activities undertaken on its behalf, is that consultants? Do they sign up to this risk management plan? How do we make sure that people that aren't TCC staff and elected members that do adopt policies, how do we make sure that they are aware that this is the risk management plan that they've signed up for? So I'm not sure we can include them. I don't know the answer to that, but do we leave that with you, or have you got an answer for me?
I think it would be a wider thing that we need to look across, because it's a common definition we have in a lot of our policies. So
Okay.
we can take it on board and then see what we can do with it.
Okay, great. Secondly, the committee. Well, I'm assuming it's us, but it doesn't say it's the Audit Risk Committee, so I think we should be clearer there.
And I think, so some of our policies are written so they can stand for a long period of time. And so if we would review this policy when in 2028 there may be a new elected council then, and the actual names of the committees might change. So the idea of having a generic committee responsible for risk is so that if a new committee is formed, then we wouldn't have to change the policy as such. It would still apply to whatever that committee is called at the time.
And potentially you could, in the definition, say the committee responsible for risk as at 2024 to 2028, this was the Audit Risk Committee, so that is clear there. I think I'd quite like to know that. And also I think just in terms of, so does that include CCOs? Do they sign up to this same policy?
They have the option of using the policy, but they also have the ability to enact their own policies.
So does the committee responsible for risk have to manage their risk, be responsible for their risk, but we don't know what their policy is? Or how they report it?
I have an understanding that the CCOs, they don't always apply under our policies, but there's some process which makes sure that we are checking they do have a policy.
I just
Through the chair, if I can add that it's a governance responsibility of the CCOs to apply the policy, and they have the choice to pick up theirs or develop their own. But it is their governance responsibility to.
And what's our governance responsibility?
To to ensure that they've got it. That's entirely your decision in terms of that they are there to govern those entities.
Well, I think number one, I don't think this committee can be responsible for risk. We can be responsible for managing the risk process, but I don't believe, the whole council is responsible for risk, and this committee is responsible for managing this policy and ensuring it's implemented. But I don't think that today that Councillor Morris, Raharia Murray and Deputy Mayor Schooler are responsible for all risk. I think that has to be a council, but as if I was agreeing to this in the whole council, I would need much more clarity on whose risk we are making sure how that's being managed in the organisations that apparently I'm responsible for.
Councillor, you mentioned I'm just as you're speaking, I'm just firing through amendments which may find the committee's favour, but I'm just wondering, you had an excellent, in the definition section, you're talking about the committee is responsible for the oversight, not the risk. Council is
managing the risk policy.
The committee is
managing and ensuring it's implemented.
For the management of the send them through to the executive by all
Just
means.
as part of when I was looking at this, I did Google to see what we should be doing or what other people are doing, and there's quite a good section in the Controller and Auditor General, and they look at, there's a section on risk in Part 2. What do we mean by risk management? They actually looked at Auckland and 3 other councils, and they just summarised what they do. They talked about in 2.11 the risk appetite statement, which is a directive from the executive endorsed by elected members, and they made a recommendation that elected members should get training on how to carry out risk management. So those are all things that I think we should do, and I would like an action about I think the section I can share with you the link I looked at, but I just thought it was and it also said you need a risk appetite statement, and I don't know if we've got one of those yet, have we?
If I can just take those in order. So in terms of the OAG, where they looked into risk management across local government, we do work closely with Auckland Council and the other councils that were part of that review. So there is a general good understanding across the sector as to what good looks like, and we can learn from each other. For risk appetite, we don't have risk appetite statements as yet. There is plans to talk to you in more detail about how we can get to a point that we have risk appetite statements that you and the whole council signs up to, which will give the whole organisation the good guardrails to operate within when we're approaching risk management.
And the recommendation was that directive came from the executive and was endorsed by elected members, and I see we've got a half-hour workshop on risk appetite, which seems quite short. It's an informal briefing rather than a workshop, which is to outline our proposed approach to actually help you to get to a point that there are risk appetite statements in place that the council as a whole will endorse. And that, so as part of that the risk appetite statement will come from executive and we will endorse it rather than elected members will write it? We can cover that off our planned approach in the briefing later on. Great. And the training on how elected members should manage risk, or carry out risk management, actually?
We can do that. What we'd like to do is potentially through the risk appetite workshop, just assess where the gap is in terms of the group, and then we can put a training plan together. It might be more tailored to the individual rather than for the group.
I'll ask my colleagues around the table, is that something you would be interested in?
Personally, yes, I think that's part of our duty, and just I note as well that the risk appetite session, apart from the workshop or the briefing today, will be for all elected members, given we're jointly and severally liable. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, this carries on the same discussion and probably a question. At point 11 in the report, which talks about this workshop that we just mentioned, how does that potentially, I think that could have some effect on the changes you're talking about in this policy. So my question is, are we doing it backwards? Should that workshop happen before changes to policy were made? Not knowing enough about this, probably need some education, but that's sort of my question.
Can I have staff advice on that question?
The policy declares the commitment to undertake risk management activities in a certain way, and we're aligning with international standards. Risk appetite is a part of doing that. So the commitment to manage risk includes, as part of that process, developing risk appetite statements. So the policy would come first, the risk appetite statements would come next.
I would still suggest that there's quite a lot of change that need to be in this current policy, so I'm probably going to question whether we can amend it well enough right now to cover some of those questions.
Sorry, can I just comment too on that? Clause 11 that I was just talking about, it specifically states there, the risk management policy and the effective management of risk is underpinned by risk appetite. So it sort of leads me to believe that putting the policy or changes to the policy should come afterwards, but take the advice of staff. If you think we're good, happy to do that way.
And I would just question those words because according to the Controller and Auditor General, the Executive gives the directive for risk appetite, and this specifically says that a full council to help elected members determine the threshold for risk, and I think that wording to me is a little bit woolly.
Another question from me, and it is on page 71 of our agenda, page 4 of the draft policy under emerging. In the recording column, in the emerging row, it says emerging risks will be recorded on the risk report to the Strategic Finance and Risk Committee. Is that a committee of the executive, or is that a former name of a council committee, or is it sort of a placeholder for perhaps a future council committee?
So my apologies, I did see that this morning. It's a drafting error, so it was the previous committee that was responsible for risk.
No, that's awesome. So I'm getting the feeling, team, that you would have more comfort in formally adopting the policy following some redrafting to include some of the changes that we have proposed, and following the risk appetite workshop, and then after that we may be more comfortable in terms of adopting the policy. Is that the committee's view and my colleagues' view?
Yes.
Yep. Rohario, do you have a view before I go to Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, kia ora, Mr. Chair. I think that's right. It sounds like the right process to go by, and I just, before agreeing with it, I mean, I potentially agree with it, I just wanted to check with staff as to whether that is going to upset anything, or whether it doesn't really matter which order we do this in, because I do think it does make sense to set the legal, set the risk appetite first, and then tidy up that policy there to help guide us.
We do still have the existing version of the policy in place, so we can still continue working to that version of the policy whilst we're working through the amendments to this version.
Oh boy, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, that being the case, yes, Councillor Schooler, and I feel sorry to my colleagues on my left who have been enduring on the fly
the
amendments.
Yes. Sorry. So I guess just in the reporting and escalation, again, just to note going forward, if it's critical, I think the Audit Risk Committee will need to hear about it more often than 3 monthly. And we have very recently had an indication that there might be quite a significant budget blowout in IT, and I just wonder, if I may ask Paul, how would that normally, we heard about it, but under this policy, where would that fit in terms of how and when this was reported through low, moderate, high, critical, and how that ends up getting to someone that is running the policy that gets it to this committee, please?
I'll start, and probably Chris will need to help me with this, but the process for working through the update to the risk register, which is based on the policy, is working through with each particular manager or general manager effectively to reassess that risk. So that happens on a regular basis, and then it's reported back into this committee. So in the event where there was a limited amount of digital spend, that would be updated through those meetings to reflect an update in risk, which is then brought back to this committee in terms of the implications of what that would be. Does that answer the question?
And just in terms of the number we talked about, would you call that low, moderate, high or critical?
In terms of if there's a shortfall of budget available, I think it really depends on the allocation of where that money is spent, and what I mean by that is I think we need to bring back to you that digital program with the relevant risk elements as to what's included in budgets and what is not. So for example, not replacing our core financial system has an element of risk. We need to explain that risk to you. It will be dependent on the elements in the program, though. Like there might be elements of the digital program that can't go forward at this point in time that doesn't create high levels of risk. It might mean that we can't achieve business efficiency as quickly, for example. There are other elements of that digital spend, if they don't go forward, will create more risk, which may move it to the high of critical if, for example, we can't undertake a critical function because of our digital system fails, for example. So it's. But
it was also, from a financial perspective, was quite a significant amount to be needing to find a home for.
That's right. So there is certainly, I think, and I'm sure if Ken was here, although I can see his picture on the screen there, would say that there is risk in the digital space of not moving forward with the system developments. Some areas of that risk are higher than others based on what that looks like.
And I just, if I may, Chair, just say from our perspective, we definitely want to work with you in terms of getting this right. It's we recognise the importance of it, and I think from we're understanding our roles, but from a risk perspective, we definitely want to be working, with you to actually make sure we're set up and that we are learning fast enough to make sure we're managing the risk for the organisation well, and managing it in a way, because I think in terms of the definition of risk, it's what's the risk of not delivering on council objectives, and of course we really want to deliver on council objectives and they change a little bit, so this is really important for us, so please do interact with us to take this forward.
Hello, sorry about the conversation there. I was just seeking advice in terms of order. Any further questions on the report, team? No. Okay, so what I'm proposing is that we move A, that we receive the report, and then we have a new B, and apologies, Carolyn, I'm doing it on the fly. New B, that we defer adoption of the policy until the July 29th committee meeting, and then if I have a seconder for that course of action, we can then speak to it and say the things that we'd like to see come back. Does that sound good? So that's moved by myself. Would we like to see that up on screen? You can see in red there. I was going a bit all over the shop. So it's just A and B there, yeah. And then take that out, and I think we'll deal with it in terms of speaking to it, and then that'll go into the minutes and pop out in due course. So that's been moved and seconded, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Schooler. I will reserve my right to speak and let you speak to it first, Councillor Schooler, if you wish.
Thank you. I think that's a very good course of action. I think as you were chatting, we were just talking about how important this is and how important it is to get right, but that actually we want to we're very open to get it right together. And I think I can talk on behalf of the colleagues that aren't part of the committee that, we are, I went back to the definition as the risk of not delivering the objectives of the council, which is, it's a huge factor for us. So we'd like to talk about it more, so very supportive of the amendment. Thank you, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Councillor Sculler. Speaking to it myself, the notes that I picked up from our conversation was the need to differentiate between the different meanings of what council is, whether it's council officers, staff, elected members, the organisation, all of us together therein. And that's something which I think will come through the other committees, because there's definitely a desire that the council's expressed in other meetings that we differentiate, even going back in reports to former governance, that we define what that is. And the other thing that I wished to mention was just around the definition of risk, adding in the likelihood and consequence elements to it, and that the committee is responsible for the management and implementation of risk, and then putting under the definition of council that council is responsible for risk, but then that needs to speak to the fact that it's elected members and all of us. So that will come through in some form of much clearer written form in the minutes. But that's all I'm going to say in speaking to it. But I want to thank you, team, for the report, and thank you for allowing us to amend, because that's what we like to do. So thank you, team. And any further speakers online? In the room? No. I'll put the recommendations A and B. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Now, looking by my agenda, that brings us to the end of the public session, save that we will reopen briefly for the karakia and closing the meeting at the end of our public excluded session. Whilst we're in the main body of the meeting, I want to acknowledge Rohario Murray. This is your first meeting with us. Thank you for your contribution today, and welcome to the committee. I also want to make it known to colleagues that this is not Rohario's first rodeo. She was a member of the former Strategy, Finance and Risk Committee under the previous governing arrangements. So thank you very much, Rohario. It's good to have you as part of our team. Thank you very much. There are no late items. I'd like a mover to go into public excluded. Moved by Councillor Schuller, seconded by Rohario Murray. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. I declare that carried. We will now move into public